On May 2nd, 1497, Giovanni Caboto, the Italian explorer we call John Cabot, set sail from Bristol, England. His goal? To find a westward sea route to trading nations in Asia. But Cabot didn't realize that a whole new world stood in his way. On June 24th, after nearly 7 weeks on the North Atlantic, he reached North America. His landfall was a rugged shore. It was not this new land, however, that would excite most of Europe. It was the sea around it, and the riches therein. The promise of this fabulous discovery would lead to countless transatlantic journeys by fishing vessels, and to settlement by many English, Irish, and French fishermen. But settlement in this new colony would prove a daunting experience. The difficulties of total reliance upon a single industry were yet to be realized. The isolation of life for residents in tiny fishing communities scattered along 6,000 miles of coastline would mean unspeakable hardships. Starvation, disease, harsh climate, and armed conflict would render much suffering and take many lives. Why would these people risk their lives to find a home here? What would the future hold for them, and for the generations that would follow? And how would they survive? Would they find what they were looking for in this newfound land? 500 years after Cabot's journey, we find a people staunchly devoted to this place they call home. They're a hardy bunch, unyielding, like the sea around them, yet renowned for their friendliness and generosity. These people are proud of their heritage, for it is the centuries of adversity that have shaped their very nature. So sit back and relax as we take you on a journey of rediscovery, of people and places, in the past and the present, in Newfoundland and Labrador, 500 years of history. Europe, the late 1400s, dawn of the Renaissance. A rebirth in learning was taking place, and old beliefs were being tossed aside with each new discovery. The printing press had just been invented, helping to spread many new ideas. Religious beliefs were being challenged, and Catholicism was banned throughout much of Europe. Developments in ship design and navigation allowed exploration of strange and distant continents. Kings in seafaring nations authorized many expeditions in the hope of finding new markets and new commodities. When John Cabot returned from his Newfoundland voyage in 1497, word spread quickly of his fantastic discovery.
The sea there is swarming with fish, which can be taken not only with a net, but in baskets let down with a stone.
The Newfoundland salt fish trade quickly became extremely important to the economies of these fishing nations. Within a few years, hundreds of fishing vessels from France, Spain, Portugal, and England were making regular trips back and forth the Atlantic. Only the English came ashore to dry their catch. England had to buy salt in foreign markets, and drying the fish meant that less salt could be used. but it also meant summer settlement in Newfoundland for English fishermen. Once the summer's fishing was done, they left Newfoundland to head home to their families in England. Year after year, so it went. Each spring, when the Newfoundland fishery began, competition for the best harbors would be fierce. Space for drying fish was limited. With no government or peace officers on the island, the result was often anarchy. To address the problem, the British government authorized the admirals of fishing vessels to settle disputes. The first admiral to arrive in a harbor in the spring automatically became judge and jury for that harbor. But the system was a poor one. These admirals often abused their power, granting favors for friends and dishing out punishments arbitrarily. In fact, there was scarcely any real justice at all, and fishermen were at the mercy of these governing tyrants. Life in the ship fishery was grim. There were the usual dangers of being shipwrecked in the ice floes off Newfoundland's coast, of straying off course in dense fog, and of being swallowed up by the treacherous storms of the North Atlantic. But nature was not the only danger these men faced. The threat of pirate attack was very real in Newfoundland waters. Peter Easton, the most notorious Newfoundland pirate, lived in Harbor Grace. With 10 ships and 500 men under his command, he pillaged many a defenseless fishing vessel. But such dangers did not deter the hardy ship fishermen, and year after year they returned here to fish, for it was a better life than they'd known at home. Many of these early ship fishermen worked as peasant farmers in places like Poole and Plymouth. In England, all the fertile land belonged to the rich. In return for working the land, peasants were allowed to keep the bare minimum of what they grew. For these people, poverty was a great reality. A crop failure could mean starvation for an entire family. Many of these people lived in mud cottages, where they were charged high rent by the landlord and heavy taxes by the state. If they were lucky, they'd get hired on board a Newfoundland fishing vessel. An entire summer's work would pay just a few pounds, but it was guaranteed income for the farmer's wife, who worked at home for the summer while her husband traveled to Newfoundland to fish. These ship fishermen dreamed of one day settling in Newfoundland, to own a piece of land, to catch fish and grow vegetables, to build a better life for their families. But no permanent settlement was allowed here. The British government preferred to keep Newfoundland as a seasonal base for the ship fishery, because it provided trained seamen for the British Navy. Settlement was also frowned upon by West Country merchants. The English West Country was an area home to the handful of wealthy families that owned and operated the Newfoundland ship fishery. These powerful merchants controlled much of England's economy. Such power gave them great influence in the British Parliament. They could virtually dictate policies regarding Newfoundland. These men believed that settlement here would jeopardize their control of the seasonal ship fishery, and so the discouragement of permanent settlement continued. Even though it was 1583 when Sir Humphrey Gilbert claimed Newfoundland for England, it wasn't until 1610 that a group of London and Bristol merchants were granted a charter to establish a colony here. The man chosen to head up that colony was John Guy. Guy selected Cupper's Cove, the area now known as Cupids, as a suitable site. The venture would be risky. Newfoundland winters were known to be severe. But Guy had no difficulty getting a group together, and in the summer of 1610, he arrived with 40 eager colonists, determined to make Newfoundland their home. Bill Gilbert is an archaeologist heading up excavations at Cupids.
But yeah, they were practicing agriculture. They were growing turnips and they were growing cabbage, and they were trying to grow rye and trying to grow wheat. They had animals. They had cows, and they had sheep, and they had goats, and they had pigs, so they needed pasture land as well. I know I know from the documents that they had a lot of trouble with scurvy, and during the winter of 1612, 1613, 7 or 8 people died of scurvy. Most historians, if you read most histories and most historians, and they talk about Cupids, you get the impression that Cupids probably lasted for maybe 10 years, the plantation, and that after about 10 years it was abandoned and left, and nobody stayed here. And it looks more and more now from what we're finding that wasn't the case, that there was more of a long-term occupation from 1610, possibly as late as 1660 or 1670 even. Certainly we're finding material with a range that goes right on through first half of the 17th century. So it is possible that the Cupids plantation went on for a lot longer than had at first been, or had for a long time been believed.